What's your name, please, and where you were brought up, please?
Ron Boreham, and I was brought up in London, went to school in London, and after the end of the war I went to work as an apprentice at Ferry Aviation in Hayes in Middlesex. But after 3 years I had a yen to fly, so I applied to the RAF as aircrew, was accepted as an air signaller. I couldn't go as an airframe driver because of eyes or navigator, but they accepted I could go as an air signaller. So I applied and I joined initially on an eight-year regular engagement, but that later changed and I stayed for life.
Oh.
But when I left, after 3 years, I was 19 when I left Ferries. So I was 19 when I joined the RAF in 1950 and did my training at Sqn Morley and at Compton Bassett, where we learnt Morse code mainly, and flying training at Sqn Morley, and then applied flying training again at Sqn Morley, but that was all on Anson's initially and then on Proctor's. After we passed out from Sqn Morley, we were all posted to Coastal Command, so we all went down to RAF St Morgan to do the Maritime Reconnaissance course, which was a 4-month course, and there it was a mixture of classroom and flying on Lancasters, which were the MR aircraft at the time. The Shackleton was just coming into service, but all our training was on Lancasters. And at the end of that, it was we were asked where we would like to sort of be posted to. It was either Kinloss to go on the Shackleton course for 5 months, or Cowshot to go on the flyboat course. But only 3 people would be able to go onto Cowshot. The rest would have to go to Kinloss. So it was a bit of a competition. The top 3 got their choice, and as I came in the top 3, I got my choice, which was Cowshot. Mainly because living in London, Cowshot was a lot closer to London than Kinloss.
Yes, that's very true.
So it wasn't sort of a preference for flying boats or anything, because I knew so little about them. But we were posted down to Cowshot, onto the OCU there, where we teamed up with the rest of the crew. There were 3 signallers that had come from the same course as me at St Morgan. We knew each other, but we met our 2 engineers there, our 2 pilots, both NCO pilots, and our 1 navigator, who was a little pilot officer, who was the only officer on the course. And we did 12 weeks down at the OCU. Initially it was classroom work, but after the first month we were introduced to the aeroplane on land, not on water, and it's quite a thing when you first go inside the Sunderland. It is huge, especially after flying in Lancasters, where we were used to crawling everywhere on hands and feet. In the Sunderland, you could actually stand up, you could walk around, you could even go upstairs, because all the flight crew were upstairs, and downstairs you've got the bow section with the door where you went in. You went down 2 steps into the ward room. Being a boat, everything was naval, all terms were naval.
Oh.
And right next to the wardroom was a galley, and you had a stove in there with 2 primus stoves to cook on. And behind the galley then was the bomb room, and behind the bomb room were the rear bunks there were 2 bunks there where ostensibly you could rest, but we never had sufficient crews to allow rest anyway. So, and then you had a cavernous back end all the way down to the rear turret, which was right down the bottom at the back end of the aircraft. And as we had been trained as signallers, at Calshot we were also trained as gunners. So we did the gunnery as well as wireless. The engineers had done the gunnery course at Leconfield as well. So we were all sort of, by the time we finished the OCU, qualified air gunners as well as signallers. We also, of course, I should have said, at St Morgan, we were introduced to radar. Because on the normal signallers course you didn't do radar. It was only when if you were going on to maritime that you needed to do the radar. So we learned basic radar and all about the radar equipment in the Lancaster, and at Calshot we learned about the radar equipment in the Sunderland, which was totally different from the Lancaster. At the end of 12 weeks, down at Calshot, we were flying on our own. We no longer had screen pilots and screen signallers and engineers with us. We were allowed to fly on our own, and we were then given our postings, and we were all told we were posted to Singapore. So it was up to Lytham St Anne, get kitted out with KD and everything for the Far East, and we were going to Seletar out in Singapore, but went home on embarkation leave, and after, well, I'd been home about a week, telegram arrived, posting cancelled, report to Pembroke Dock, such and such, warrants to follow. And sure enough, in the post, the following day were warrants to travel not to Singapore, to Pembroke Dock. Now, I'd never heard of Pembroke Dock, other than at Calshot people spoke about it. So I got a map out to find out where it was first, and found it was on the extreme end of Wales. And never having been to Wales before in my life, I thought this was going to be interesting. I was given train times, and in those, this was what, 1950, I joined 51, this was very early 52, this was. Checked up, train times, train 9:25 PM from Paddington. We're living at Hayes then, as we were. Paddington was only just up the road, so that was no problem. But arrived at 9:25 to be told that the train would arrive in Pembroke Dock at 7:25 the following morning. So it was a long journey, but I met up with the rest of the crew who'd also had the same telegram, and we all travelled down together. When we arrived at Pembroke Dock, of course, came out of the station, looked around and thought, well, where do we go from here? Because there was no one to meet us or anything. And we asked, in those days they had a ticket office and a station master. We asked the station master, how did we get to Pembroke Dock? He said, well, you go straight down there and you'll come to a wall. He said, then just follow that wall all the way round, he said, and eventually you'll come to a big gate. So we went round, found Pembroke Dock, and it was, as he said, a long walk, especially with 2 git bags, one full of normal clothing. We still had our KD that we'd been issued with. That was all in with our kit, and of course our own personal kit with us. So we arrived at Pembroke Dock, booked in. The first place we found was the sergeant's mess, which was just inside the gate on the left-hand side, a beautiful stone building with a lovely portico door. I think it later became the Port Hotel, but booked into the sergeant's mess there, and we were allocated rooms down in what was then known as the aircrew block, which later became part of the Sunderland Trust offices. It is, and it's strange that John Evans' office was the room that I was originally in. Having arrived on the station, it was breakfast first, of course, in the sergeant's mess, and then sleep. And we slept for the rest of the day. In the evening it was back in the mess, and we met lots of other people from 201 Squadron and 230 Squadron. None of us knew exactly where we were going. It wasn't until the following day when we booked in that we found that 3 of us were going to 230 Squadron, the others were going to, was it 3, 1, 2, yeah, 3 of us, the navigator and 2 of the signallers went to 230 Squadron, the rest went to 201 Squadron.
Can I ask, Ron, how old were you then?
20. Yes, big toys for young boys, they were in those days. I think the eldest on our crew were the 2 pilots. So they were all NCO pilots. They were both, one was a sergeant, one was a flight sergeant, but they were both ex-wartime pilots, so who'd rejoined the RAF. But the rest of us were all 20-year-olds that were going. So on a normal, on a RAF station is, you have to do what they call an arrival. It's a chit that you go around the whole station getting signatures. Of course, first place of call is pay accounts, obviously. And the last one that you ever go to is the Padre. He's the last on the list, but pay accounts is always the first. And then once we'd done our arrival, it was a case of, right, well, you are going to 201 Squadron, you go across to 201 Squadron headquarters, you 3 are going to 230 Squadron, you go across to 230 Squadron headquarters. And I can only speak from now, from 230 Squadron. We went across, we were in the eastern hangar at, on the station, and the offices were built alongside the hangar. So we managed to find our way across there, reported in there, and sort of people looked and said, oh, new boys, the crew room's up there, go and get a cup of tea, and the CO will have a word with you during the morning. So we went up to the crew room, met some of the other NCOs and people that were on the squadron, and eventually were called in, welcomed by the station commander, and told that we wouldn't be crewed, we would just be floating for a while until they decided what cruise we would go on. The squadron at that time were working up to go to Greenland to take the Greenland expeditions people to Greenland, but we were told that being new boys on the squadron we wouldn't be going because they were only taking skeleton crews and they wanted experience, not people straight out of training. So we flew sort of occasionally with all different crews. It was just a case of, you know, oh, we're short of a signaller, grab him, we're short of a navigator, grab him, and that was it. Eventually, when they came back from Greenland, from the expedition, we exercise main brace were coming up, and I was put with Jock Castles, Flight Lieutenant Castles, on his crew initially, and went up to Norway with the squadron. We were the lucky one. We drew the long straw. 201 squadron got the short straw, and they went to Sqn, which is up in the Orkneys. Not the best of places, but we went up to Norway, up to Levanger, and lived on board USS Currituck there.
That's another question. How long would it take to get from here to Norway on the Sunderland?
From here to Norway up to about 3 hours. That's all.
Oh.
Yeah, it's
I
surprising.
expected you to say longer. I was surprised.
Yeah, 3-4 hours. But Levanger is right down the south of Norway, so it's just across a short hop, sort of across the sea from Scotland. But yeah, I think it's about 3 or 4 hours. I'd have to check my logbook. I can't actually remember now.
The next question. Obviously, you had leave, and I know that's where you met your wife. Now, can I ask you, how old was you, and where did you meet? You don't want me asking that.
Ah, we haven't got there yet.
Oh,
I haven't met the wife yet.
Sorry, go on, you carry on.
I was a young 20-year-old, a red-blooded young 20-year-old. We were told by all the locals that about the local young ladies in town. They were very quick to tell us, but we went up and on exercise main base, and we stayed on board the USS Currituck, which was an American supply ship based in the fjord, because the Americans had their Mariner flying boats up there. So we were sort of working with the Americans, and it was a big naval air-sea exercise with the American Navy, the Royal Navy, and the Royal Air Force, and the American maritime aircraft. We were there for about 10 days, I think it was. Yeah, about 10 days the exercise lasted, and I think we flew about 4 or 5 times from Levanger on exercises. Again, mainly fleet exercises. And it's whilst I was up there that I was taken off Jock Cashell's crew and put on Red Stabbert's crew. And Red Stabbert eventually became my sort of permanent captain. Oh. But I went on his crew, and at the end of the exercise we flew back to Pembroke Dock, and I think that was 52. That must have been towards the end of September 52. That was. Having got back to Pembroke Dock, the weather wasn't good, so it was a case of find something to do. Well, Fridays in those days, the pubs weren't open on Sundays in those days, but Fridays was a market day, and Red Stabbert on a Friday afternoon, if you weren't flying, was you and you, Tommy Tucker's, which was a local pub, the Navy Inn, crate of beer, back to the crew room. Here's the money. So it would be a case of go down to Tommy Tucker's, get a crate of beer, along with several others, take it back to the crew room, and a party would start. And that party would carry on in the sergeant's mess until the wee hours. That would, quite often. But that was a regular occurrence. If we weren't flying on a Friday, it was either go down and get a crate, or the whole half the squadron would be in Tommy Tucker's. And of course, in those days, it was men only in the bar. Ladies had their own room. They did the ladies' room.
Yeah, of course they did.
Yes, it was a men only bar. And it didn't take long to settle into Pembroke Dock. The people were all very friendly, especially with us. And it was, I think, must have been only 3 or 4 weeks after I'd been here. I'd been back from Norway, that one of the other members of the squadron said, Friday night there's a dance at St Patrick's Hall. Why don't you come up, meet some of the local ladies? So we thought, sounds good. So we went up there, very much out of place when we got there, overdressed because we had ties on, we had jackets on, whereas the locals were just in sort of scruff order, really. But we met some of the local ladies, we had a dance there, and that's where I met my wife. Because I latched onto this young lady that I liked, danced with her most of the evening, and then asked if I could see her home, which she said yes, and walked her home. And she at the time, she lived in, was living down in Cromwell Street with her aunt. So I walked down there, and we got to the bottom of the road, and she said, you can go now. I said, oh. I said, well, can I see you again? She said, well, when? I said, would you like a typical, the Grand was still going then, the cinema. I said, how about going to the Grand on Wednesday to the cinema? So we arranged to be outside the Grand on the Wednesday. We met outside on that Wednesday, went to the cinema, best seats, 3 and a penny at the back, courting seats, and at the end of the film, went home. I thought, well, I'm not going to say goodbye at the end of the road, so I sort of walked up Cromwell Street with her, but Nan said, no, you don't have to come, you don't have to come. You know, anyway, I said, no, I'll see you to the door, and walked up to the door, saw her to the door, and there's a low wall there. We sat on the wall just talking, more or less asking where I'd come from, where she'd come from, or what have you. And suddenly the door opened and her aunt said, is that you, Nancy? Bring that young gentleman in. So I was invited in, and only to find that her uncle also came from London, so we were great. We had a common interest straight away. The only thing my wife wouldn't tell them was that I was aircrew, because there were a lot of little aircrew running around Pembroke Dock around that time. So we sort of sketched around what I did, but after that it became a regular thing, and I think in November we got it, in the October I think it was, we got engaged, and we got married in February on February the 14th in '53. Yeah, it was a very sort of swift romance. And everyone said, oh, marry in haste, repent in leisure, but I think we were sort of meant for each other, and that was it. And we stayed at Pembroke Dock then. We got married in February, as I say, and we lived, we've had to find accommodation to live, so we lived in Law Street. In those days, Arthur Rowe had a cobbler's shop at the bottom of Law Street. It's where the brasserie is now. And we lived over the top of that. And we were there for, close on 2 years, because my eldest son was born in Pembroke Dock in October '54. He was. And it wasn't long after that that I was posted from Pembroke Dock. I'm running out of things to say.
Where did you get posted to? Where did you get posted to?
From Pembroke Dock I was posted down to St Edward in Cornwall.
Oh.
You can't go much further.
No.
Because the only way to St Edward is to Bristol and then back all the way back down. But I was posted to St Evelyn's 220 Squadron on Shackletons. Not the nicest of aeroplanes. The noisiest, yes. And
that's with the two props, isn't it? Is it two props?
contra-rotating props, yeah, 4-engine contra-rotating. The noisiest aeroplane in the RAF, it was. Having come from sort of a leisurely aeroplane like the Sunderland, which was as gentle as a lamb when it was flying, and beautiful to fly in. Yeah, Shackletons were a bit of a culture shock. They were. At least you could. They were better than Lancaster. You could stand up.
You could stand up. There was a bit more room in there, was
A
it?
bit more room, yes. But they still had sort of Lincoln wings from the wing. The wings were from the Lincoln, and all they'd done is make like a Lancaster fuselage, but deeper, so that you could.
And did you carry cargo with that? What would you carry in them?
They were anti-submarine.
Oh, I see.
Again, it was all coastal command still. They were anti-submarine, and but they had a massive bomb bay, so everything was carried internally.
Were you looking for Russians then? Or were you looking for Russians on the coastal command, or anything that was a bit untoward then?
Well, the Cold War was still on,
yes,
so it was a case of just regular patrols, looking mainly. The Russians used to send ships round from Murmansk. They'd come down through the Iceland Gap into the Atlantic, and if we got the wind of one of those coming down, then we'd normally go and just track it on the radar. We would, and just sort of shadow it to see where it was going, what it was doing. Mainly they were going to Cuba at that time, but it was all sort of anti-submarine work and playing with the Navy. I found accommodation for my wife down there, and we lived in a caravan with a baby, which was interesting for about 9 months, and then we managed to get a quarter down there in Padstow. And we stayed in Cornwall from until when? When did I leave Cornwall? I'm just trying to think now. But my second son was born there. He was born in Padstow, and he was born in 57. So it must have been 58. I was posted from the squadron to flying wing at St Morgan, because the Mark III Shackleton was coming in, and the South Africans were the first to get the Mark III. But whilst I was on 220 Squadron, I'd done the Advanced Signals course, and that included all the equipment that was in the Mark III Shackleton. So I was posted across to St Morgan to teach the New Zealanders how to use the equipment in the Mark III Shackleton.
On the Shackleton they had a funny like whispers in the front. That was for the radar then? On the Shackleton, is it like whispers with wires on?
No.
No.
It had a dustbin. It had a dustbin that you could lower that had the radar in.
Oh.
Yeah. It had a Mark 21 radar in the Mark III Shackleton. But we flew with them a couple of times. We only did a couple of trips in the Mark III. And once they finished, I was then posted Singapore at last.
A bit warm with it.
Yes, but we were told that we wouldn't be able to go out accompanied with our wives, because we were ferrying Shackleton out to 205 Squadron in Singapore. It was when 205 Squadron were taking over from 205 Flying Boat Squadron, which was the last flying boat squadron out there. And so we went from Ballycully out to Singapore, ferrying this Shackleton out, and that became our aeroplane out there. that did. I think we were, ours was Echo, A, L, B, C, D. We were the 5th aircraft to go out there. We were Echo. And of course the first thing you do when you get out there, if you're married, is find somewhere, private accommodation somewhere, call fam. And 8 weeks later, my wife and 2 children both came out to stay with us. And we lived in private accommodation for a while, then we moved into quarters, and my 2 eldest boys were growing up there. And at the end of my tour Singapore was only a two-year tour, it was, because of the heat and what have you. You only did 2 years out there. But whilst I was out there, of course, I saw the last of the flying boats, because they completely finished in '59 whilst I was out there. But at the end then, where did we go then? I was posted back then. I'd now done 3 consecutive flying tours. So they said it time for a rest. Posted to Hull Abington, teaching air SIGs, air electronics officers, and advanced signallers. So that was a ground job, which I didn't like very much. I don't like chalk and talk. So I was there for about 18 months, I think it was, when there was a signal came round from where was it? From Signals Command, which was down at Medmenham, asking for volunteers to train as special operators on aircraft operated by Signals Command from RAF Watton up in Norfolk. As I wasn't very happy with the chalk and talk, and as I fulfilled all the requirements, I applied, much to the annoyance of my boss, but and it didn't take long. How long was it? I think within a week I heard that I was going for an interview, had been accepted to go for an interview at Watton, and I went up to Watton, sat the interview. The requirements were that you'd done at least 1,000 flying hours operationally, you'd done at least 2 tours on a squadron, and you had at least 5 years left to serve, because it was a 5-year tour on the squadron that you were going on. So I went up for the interview, sat the interview, came back, and a fortnight later was posted to Watton, to the Spec Op Training School. And it was there that we started learning totally different equipments from what we'd been used to. And it didn't take long to suss out what we were going to be doing. And we were all told that we were going to 51 Squadron, which was like Comets, which were nice after Shackletons. Yeah, we were going to Comets, either Comets or on to Canberras. But I went on to the Comet, and I spent 5 years on 51 Squadron, and then we found, once we got on the squadron, where we were flying was around the Russian coast, and all we were doing were plotting Russian radars. So we regularly used to fly up the Baltic, across past Poland, up, and we were always intercepted by the Russians when we went up there during the day. Never at night, but always during the day we were intercepted. But they never...
The MiGs were on the tail then? Hmm? You had MiGs chasing you then?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there were only MiG-17s, MiG-19s that we had then, that were sort of, all they would do is come up, fly alongside and watch us, and you know, they'd sort of watch us, and the minute we turned away to come back, we only ever made one pass. We never came back the same way as we went. The other place we used to go up to was Bodo, up in North, which is what, 60 miles north of the Arctic Circle in Norway, and there we used to fly around the top of North Cape of Norway, down past Murmansk and then up Archangel or Nova Zembla up there, because that was one of the main testing grounds for the Russian radars. So they were interesting trips. The only thing with Bodo was it was 6 months day, 6 months night there, because they're so far north. You could fly at 3 o'clock in the morning and it was bright daylight. Or you fly at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and it was pitch black, depending on whether it was winter or summer. So I spent 5 years on there. Every other month was away, was a detachment. It was. And you went down to Cyprus. We always went covertly down to Cyprus. We'd go open as far as El Adam. We would fly with sort of normal transport command call sign, but from El Adam to Cyprus then we'd go covert, and everything was done on time. And from there we used to do trips up into the Black Sea, because that was...
Was that up high then? That was up high?
Oh yes.
Very high.
Yeah, we were up at 45,000 feet normally in the Comet.
Yes.
And because these were old Comets with the square windows, like the ones that had crashed, we weren't pressurised. Not full pressurisation.
So it was cold as well?
We had a partial, yeah, they were very, very cold. Partial pressurisation, but I mean at 45,000 feet the cabin pressure was 35,000. So we were on oxygen from the whole time that we were flying up there. And that was sort of regular. My daughter was born at down in Wiltshire. And